Alright, the Souls Lab events in 2023. Honestly, after how absolutely insane 2022 was for both Souls Lab 2 and 3 and just Souls Lab in general, I feel it only made a lot of sense that 2023 would be a much more lighthearted and peaceful year, and it definitely was that. There weren't even that many mission-based events this year. In fact, a majority of the year there actually wasn't, which proves that. And that was honestly needed. Also, speaking of 2022's video for this, I want to apologize that it was over 2.5 hours long. You can thank the majority of the year being mission-based for that. But thankfully, like I said, this was a much more lighthearted and peaceful year. And we will be seeing that as we go through. Of course, a few random events happened that were pretty big. But I don't think they were as big as what we did in 2022, which honestly was really good. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Kicking things off here in Souls Lab 2 with the New Year's party of 2023. It started on December 29th, 2022, and ended on January 5th, 2023. This party obviously celebrated the start of 2023. The party was mainly seen in a green theme, much like LEGO's Island was. The roof was obviously decorated like usual, and it of course was at night. But here's the thing, this is ironically the first New Year's party in I want to say a good, this is technically the second New Year's party in a row, to be specific, to not coincide with the Christmas party. Unfortunately, that wouldn't be the case again the year after. But this party was a bit different compared to previous New Year's parties. This time around, instead of it just being on the roof, it was actually around the outside of the lab. And it showed various memories from throughout the year of 2022, because of how absolutely freaking insane it was. So it only made sense. Because if you remember, 2022 happened to be one of the biggest years for the lab ever since 2016. But regardless, we shared memories across the outside of the lab from that year alone, and it was very, very cool. This mainly took place on January 1st, as that update did occur then. This honestly was a very cool New Year's party. It was technically the, second New Year's party in a row to take place at night, or at least in, the evening sky, I think. But regardless, this was very cool. It was a nice way to start off 2023. But don't worry, because Souls Lab 3 also had a New Year's party for 2023. It started on January 2nd, and that was actually for 2023 because it ended up actually starting a day late because the Christmas party was taken down a day late. It came to an end on January 8th, 1 day short of a week, but that's mainly because it started a day late. Unlike Souls Lab 2, the lab was actually pretty much entirely decorated, whereas in that one, it was mainly just the outside. But as you may notice, there are very much a lot of differences, whereas Souls Lab 3 has a lot of the lab decorated, and Souls Lab 2 was dedicated to certain memories. So there were a few minor differences here. And basically, all the ice left over from the Christmas party pretty much played and stayed, including the ice castle, all during this party. But it wouldn't be gone for a while though. So that's mainly it with this party. And, well, let's move on. The next party to occur in Souls Lab in 2023 was the Souls Lab 8th Anniversary Party. This is mainly the Souls Lab 2 version. It started on January 12th and ended on the 19th. This obviously celebrated the 8-year anniversary of the Souls Lab series overall. And don't worry, we did have a Souls Lab 3 version. I'll get to that in a few minutes. But regardless, the Souls Lab 2 version mainly consisted of, obviously, the main color being blue, because why the frick not? This played out very similarly to the 6th anniversary party in Souls Lab for the Souls Lab 2 version. But instead of all of the events being shown off, it was only based off of the new events coming to the Souls Lab 2 in 2023. One of them being the Winter Luau, which we'll get to very soon. Not the next event, or the next one after, but it's definitely a few events away. There were even some rooms that were dedicated to just straight up the anniversary in general, mainly the classic Souls Lab 2 in general. Heck, I think there was even one room for a single event that ended up not actually happening, being Dream Rooms. We should probably do that at some point. because, yeah, this was like the only event from this party to actually not occur. Like, that's actually serious. Regardless, this was a very cool party. Now, what happened at Zolas Lab 3? In the Zolas Lab 3 version of this party, which started on January 15th, the lab anniversary day itself, ironically, and it was originally supposed to end on January 22nd. However, it unfortunately ended, I think, 1 week later on January 29th. Now, this party featured rooms from events that were returning in 2023. But we still had rooms dedicated to the actual anniversary itself, of course. But the main highlight was rooms that were based off of events that normally return every year, like the summer party, for a clear example, which we will get to later. And that's genuinely it. There's not much else to say about this, so let's move on. Finally, our first event that is not across both labs. The Cave Expedition of 2023. It started on January 26th and ended on February 2nd. This is for Zolas Lab 2 to be specific. This was the first cave expedition in almost 8 years since August 2015, and it was completely different compared to that. Starting on December 29th, 2023, mysterious cracks ended up coming out of the ore room and giant window room, alongside the maze and gold mine, meaning something was up. That ended up being the fact that a huge cave was opened up at the end of the tunnels that were inside the maze. In order to put a stop to all of this, we needed to go down to the cave that was causing all of this. And we did exactly that. And this was actually really fun, because we explored a cave that we never knew was down here before. Some of the missions included getting rid of all the crystal cracks that were seen in the amethyst parts of this cave. And another consisted us blowing up a ton of dripstones inside the cave, which was honestly way more satisfying than it needed to be. But my god, it took forever. But oh, was so satisfying. At the end of the event, the cave unfortunately closed off, but thankfully all the problems caused within the maze, ore room, giant window room, and gold mine were finally resolved, as we could see here, concluding the event. It was so cool to finally bring this event back after 8 years, and who knows what I could do next to improve upon it. Meanwhile, in Zolas Lab 3, we were celebrating its 6-year anniversary. It started on February 5th and came to an end on February 12th. This party was very different, as it took place all in the future, aka February 2nd, 2027, a few days before the 10-year anniversary of Zolas Lab 3. But despite it being in the future, this was such a cool anniversary party. But it was also mission-based at the same time. Yeah, we came to the future for a reason. 2023 Master Evil Oinkers was trapped here in the future by 2027 Evil Sheep Leader, and our goal was to obviously find him and defeat Evil Sheep Leader once and for all. And of course, save this future time period, while also celebrating the 6-year anniversary of Zolas Lab 3 overall. On the actual anniversary day of Zolas Lab 3, we were greeted to quite literally one of the biggest surprises of all time, the return of classic Zolas Lab 3, aka the original version of Zolas Lab 3. This was done on February 6, 2023, the 6-year anniversary day of Zolas Lab 3 overall. And I don't mean this specific world right here. We'll get to that later in the video. We're just talking just Zolas Lab 3 overall. This was showcased with Rose Crystal, and honestly was one of the coolest ways to celebrate this awesome anniversary. But do remember, this was mission-based, so we still had a few mission-based things to take care of. One of them consisted of having to go to Zolas Lab 2 and find all the gold that was stolen from the future. So that was pretty cool. Another consisted of having to find the future Coolcat 33 sheep and bring them back down to the regular lab, after I think being trapped in Special Evil Sheep Leader's base in the future. Unfortunately, I did not end up defeating Evil Sheep Leader in 2027 or freeing 2023 Master Evil Oinkers. This was the second operation that we straight up lost. And it was all because of me not going there on February 11th, 2023 to go and defeat him. Overall, 2027 Evil Street Leader unfortunately won and took over Zolozab Free for a few weeks. From this point forward until we reach March, everything will be in Zolozab 2. Speaking of which, now that Zolozab Free was gone for a bit, we only had Zolozab 2 left at the time. This next one being the Valentine's Day party of 2023. It started on February 9th and ended on the 16th, making it one of the earliest Valentine's Day parties we have ever had in the lab's history. But 2024 is actually going to be the earliest because it'll start on February 8th, at least for Zolozab 2. This party was heavily rose themed, if it wasn't already pretty clear. And it definitely shows. Some of the main colors consisted, of course, red, pink, and white, which are technically the three main Valentine's Day colors. That's why they were in this party. And the majority of this party consisted in those colors respectively, which is already pretty clear here. And honestly, this was one of my personal favorite rooms right here. Honestly, this was such a cool party. I think it might even be even better than the previous years. While of course it might be slightly smaller, I think it really gave off more of a Valentine's Day themed vibe than the previous year. Not dissing the 2022 event, but I honestly feel this was a bit better. Plus also, the roses were all over the place, so that made a lot of sense. There were definitely a few items that were given out. Oh, and yeah, there was some lag there for some reason at the time. But I pretty much ignored it. Heck, even Classic Zolozab 2 was decorated, obviously with custom decoration. And Flower Sheep was the one who mainly held this party, because she was out there. That might be the case again this year. I don't know, we'll see. Oh yeah, speaking of the Winter Luau back there, that is exactly what the next event was. The Winter Luau 2023. I can say 2023 because it's coming back in January 2024, literally in 12 days as of recording this video. It started on February 23rd and ended on March 2nd. This was an entirely new event for Zolozab 2 and was originally supposed to coincide alongside Zolozab 3, but unfortunately, as I stated earlier, Zolozab 3 was taken over, so that had to be skipped. So instead it was only in Zolozab 2, at least in terms of the labs. And we already saw a room from this party earlier during the 8-year anniversary party of Zolozlab, hence why I said we would come back to this later. And here we are, proving that wasn't a lie. There were a lot of items given out in this party, and by the way, the bedrock ceiling up there was mainly a reference to the fact that that month that the party occurred was ironically the 5-year anniversary of Operation Dome in 2018. So we wanted to do a small reference by doing the bedrock ceiling part of the dome. Originally, the party was going to be in a full-on dome, but then we realized that's a little too much, so we got rid of it immediately. Another thing we did to reference Operation Dome 2018 was have some of the rooms actually be slightly dark, to coincide with the fact that the lab ended up becoming dark by the end of Operation Dome, in terms of its lighting, so we wanted to do a short reference there. Outside of that, this mainly was a normal Winter Luau. On the day the event was being taken down, March 2nd, 2023, we finally got to see the event outside of course, that bedrock ceiling that we saw earlier. This also meant we got to see the party in full-on light, and that was honestly really cool. No, seriously, there were a lot of items in this party. And there's your proof I wasn't even kidding about it being full-on lit up now, because the event was literally about to go down at the time. Speaking of which, we almost had an event after the event ended that would have consisted of us having the lab covered in snow, which mainly consisted of course, the following. Thankfully, I reversed all of this, and it never ended up happening. Because I'm just that good, and I outsmarted someone who we'll talk about later. Jumping back to Zolozab 3, we needed to finally do something to get it back, and the only way we could do it was Operation Zolozlab 2023. However, this is actually a very different Operation Zolozlab, as this was the first one to be split into two parts, with the first part taking place in March and part 2 taking place in Zolozlab 2 later on in the year. For part 1, which was to, of course, get Zolozlab 3 back in our hands after, of course, I let it get taken over, it started on March 5th and ended on the 10th. Like I said, the main idea was to, of course, try and get Zolozlab 3 back from the 2027 Evil Sheet Leader. On day 1, on March 5th, 2023, we went to November 9th, 2018, which was ironically the day this entirety of the universe Zolzath 3 was created, and the Adventure Party was a thing. Now, the missions in this party played out very differently, as these were all time-based. We also had a very limited amount of attempts being free, so that was another major difference. On day 2, March 6, 2023, which ended up being a day late on March 7th, 2023, we ended up going to March 18th, 2019, which was, of course, the farewell of Zolzath 3 temporarily. As I previously addressed, all of these were time-based. The missions, where we had a certain time limit. It was very cool that we went back to this day, as it was a very important day. It's kind of funny, because we're coming up to the 5-year anniversary of this day in just a few months, actually. On day 3, March 7th, 2023, we went to May 8th, 2019, which a room from that was previously seen in the Zolzath 3 version of the 8-year anniversary of Zol's Lab. So it made a reference that this was going to be here. This was of course when the 2019 Lab of Doom was occurring in Zolzath 3. And of course we had a time limit to of course, obviously destroy the machine. This arguably had to be one of the hardest missions in the entire event. So much so that the Cool Get Freddy Free Sheep had to do something about it. And if it wasn't for him, I don't think we would have completed this. And as you could tell, it wasn't a joke. On day 4, March 8th, 2023, we went to December 12th, 2021. This mission mainly consisted of finding all of the books across Zolzath 3. Oh yeah, we were actually able to remove the time limit in this. Well, technically 2027 Evil Sheet Leader did that. And oh boy, as you could tell, he surely regretted it. Also, we were very close to getting caught by my past self. Much like how we almost did in Mission 9 of Operation Legos Island 2022. On the final day, Day 5, March 9th, 2023, we went to November 29th, 2023, which would of course be in the future. Obviously, none of this technically happened when we did end up hitting this day. So, yeah. In fact, we were actually supposed to go to November 29th, 2023 when we actually got to that day in Zolzath 3, but unfortunately never happened. So all of this is a joke. The idea behind this was that there was a huge volcano created in this time period in the future. And while I was trapped in this volcano by the future Evil Cluck, we also had to save the Evil Sheep Leader from that time period. But this is where things got interesting. However, I was able to call off the battle that happened in the volcano immediately and tell what actually was going on, which caused us to work together, even though it would break the timeline. And it sure did, because on March 12th, 2023, time was broken. Meaning what I did in that finale was a mistake. But hey, I thought it was fun at the time. Not realizing, oh, frick, that would mess up everything. Thankfully, though, this would be resolved rather quickly, as I would obviously bury all these cracks. Now, we were actually able to defeat 2027 Evil Sheep Leader after all, despite what I just said. This honestly took way longer than it was supposed to. And hey, we still did it regardless. With all that said, that wraps up this event, and let's move on. Zolzath 3 was back in our hands, and we could continue things as normal. After the insane events that was, of course, that event, we now had the St. Patrick's Day party of 2023. With Zolzath 3 back, we were able to do it across both labs again, to mainly make up for it for Valentine's Day. It started on March 16th and ended on the 23rd. As you would expect, the whole lab was decorated in green, maybe a little too much, to the point where it kinda almost blended into each other. But it was really cool regardless. And unlike 2022, the entire lab was actually decorated this time to make up for it after the previous year, mainly because of Operation Villains. With the out of the way, we were actually able to decorate basically the whole lab again, which was awesome, and we're going to do that again this year too. This was honestly so cool. It was nice having a full-on event again after the year prior. In fact, one room in particular from Operation Villains, or at least after the events of the villain takeover, actually did end up returning in this party for some reason. Scratch that, we actually know why this was the case. Alternate Universe Evil Street Leader, which we'll talk about very soon, casted a spell on the HQ library to look like their designs from when the lab was taken over a year prior, which can mainly explain this. Outside of that, mainly the entire lab was all decorated in green, which was amazing. And a ton of cool items were given out as well. I think like only 4 items total, but hey, regardless, there were some given out regardless. And don't worry, there was plenty of gold in this party, I promise. Now, as for Zolas Lab 3, on the other hand, it started on March 17th and came to an end on the 19th. Due to us only getting Zolas Lab 3 back just a few days prior, and the time split also being a thing, the party was rather small, but there were still a lot of really cool decorations regardless. This party was originally supposed to start on the 12th, but because of the time split, it ended up being delayed by 5 days. It was still a really cool party regardless, and like Zolas Lab 2, a majority of the lab was decorated as well, which was honestly really cool. There were still a few items given out in this party, and while it didn't last that long, it was still really cool. Now it's time for one of the biggest events of the year, Operation Multiverse. For Zolas Lab 2, it started on March 23rd and ended on April 6th. This was another event coinciding across both labs, but we'll talk about Zolas Lab 3's later. Remember how I said we would be talking about a certain somebody later on? That would of course be Alternate Universe Evil Street Leader, as his goal was to go across the Zolas Lab multiverse and destroy certain parts of it. For example, the first universe we went to was the Light Universe, and the goal and the premise was that Alternate Universe Evil Street Leader destroyed all of the lights across the lab, using, of course, the Light Offer 3000. And we weren't able to go to the next universe until the mission was done. This was honestly such a cool operation idea, as we finally get to experience some things that we never thought we'd ever see before. And genuinely, it was amazing, but it only gets better from here. The next universe we went to, which was originally supposed to be on March 27th, ended up being on March 31st instead, was the anniversary-themed universe. A universe in the multiverse that was based off of all the anniversaries across the lab's history up to this point, which was genuinely amazing. This was honestly even cooler than the Light universe. There was so much color, and overall looked way better, as it really showed how far the lab had come at the time. And the inside of the lab definitely showed that. This right here had to be my personal favorite part. Could you blame me? One of the main missions in this party, at least for the anniversary universe, was mainly to destroy all of the Operation Ally 2023 and 24 signs respectively. Another was to find all the stolen event logos in Lego's Island, and as previously stated, we couldn't leave the universe until both missions were done, which they were. And that was it for the Zolas Lab 2 portion of this event, because the last bit of it took place in Zolas Lab 3, which arguably was actually delayed for a bit. It was originally supposed to start on March 26th, but it ended up starting, ironically, on, I think, April 2nd or April 5th, respectively, with the episode actually coming out on April 8th, or more importantly, April 9th, because I didn't get it out in time. But regardless, we still won. Now, this was actually even scarier than Operation Zolas Lab, because if we lost this, both labs would be entirely gone. So this was even more important than the Operation Villains tragedy that happened, because both labs would be gone this time. We'd have no way of getting them back. This last universe was the Good and Evil universe. And this was right here where we were almost straight up out of time to be able to save the universe, as we had until midnight to do so. And this was around the time that I got that netherite pickaxe that I would keep in my inventory for Zolas Lab 3 from this point forward. If you were curious where I got it, it was this very mission alone. This would remain in my inventory for the rest of time. And it definitely shows, because now it's in my inventory for, well, forever at this point. Now, the good news is we did end up defeating Alternate Universe Evil Street Leader and ultimately saving the Zolas Lab multiverse once and for all. This honestly had to be, arguably, one of the coolest universes we've ever seen. The Good and Evil universe. Half evil and half good. Hence the name. The balcony had to be my personal favorite room. Could you blame me? Seriously, it's just way too freaking good. It obviously had a U for alternate universe evolution leader, or mainly just alternate universe. As a fun fact, that was actually the original name of this event before it was changed to multiverse because we thought it sounded cooler. And we also wanted to take the event in a much cooler direction. An alternate universe would only just be in one universe. No, we wanted to actually take this a lot more seriously, so we changed it to multiverse. Which, fun fact, the day that ended up being changed to, which also the same day we lost Souls Free temporarily. That's just a fun fact. And if you're curious where the battle took place, it was in an alternate version of the Creations world, at least an alternate version of the Zola's Lab portion of the world, where he ended up being defeated. This was super cool though. With this event finally wrapped up, it was finally time to celebrate Easter. It started on April 6th and ended on the 13th, at least for Zola's Lab 2 that is. This was the first full-on Easter event to take place in Zola's Lab 2 entirely. It wasn't just an Easter egg hunt anymore, no. It was a full-on event this time, with that still being included in. And the same would apply to Zola's Lab 3 as well. The lab was decorated with a ton of pastel colors, mainly the following being tan, blue, yellow, green, and pink. Mainly light green to be specific, where there were bunny pens all over the place. Speaking of which, those guys were frickin' everywhere, and much like Lego's Island, there were crosses everywhere, referencing the true meaning of Easter. A majority of the lab was decorated for this party, but not all of it, only a few. Regardless, the egg hunt was also really fun too. And much like Lego's Island, the eggs were now changed to dragon eggs, which this might be a thing going forward for a bit, as I actually like the idea. Yeah, like I just said, a majority of the lab wasn't decorated, but a good majority of it was as well. So, that's cool. Now as for Zola's Lab 3, oh no, this was even more insane. It started on April 9th, aka Easter for that year actually, and ended on April 16th. Like Zola's Lab 2, a good majority of the lab was decorated, with another Easter egg hunt going on alongside it, as it was also mainly Easter at the time that this event occurred. Like, literally the day that it started was Easter. Again, a good majority of the lab was decorated. Not everywhere, but there were definitely some rooms that were decorated. And while some of them were rather small, it made it look even cooler than we ever thought. Probably even cooler than the Zola's Lab 2 one, if I'm being honest. But I don't really mind. Actually, scratch that. I think almost the entire lab was actually decorated for this thing, so never mind. I think I take all that back. And the Easter egg hunt was also really fun too. And that's really all that needs to be said. Let's move on. Continuing with Zola's Lab 3, we have the Earth Day Party of 2023. It started on April 16th and ended on the 23rd. As you would expect, the lab was decorated in an Earth Day theme, and it was pretty much everywhere. No, like really, holy frick! I think we went even more insane than the Zola's Lab 2 one, which we'll get to very soon as this one did take place before this. And we had plenty of activities to do across the event, with basically every single one of them except for, I think, the last one being done on April 22nd, as we can see there for the Recycle Hunt. Speaking of which, while this was actually done a day late on April 23rd, the day the event was going down, this party did receive an add-on to coincide with the Recycle Hunt, mainly the Recycle Center, the one we mainly see in Zola's Lab 2 every Earth Day. With the Recycle Hunt included, it was time for the Recycle Hunt, which was honestly really cool. Also, I really loved how I made this little layout for the recycling plant, like the pathway to get there. That was honestly really cool. The Recycle Hunt was a success, and now, let's see what happened in Zola's Lab 2. In the Zola's Lab 2 version of this party, which started on April 20th and ended on the 27th, this party also was pretty insane, but not as insane as the Zola's Lab 3 version. There was still a Recycle Hunt. It was mainly outside rooms that were updated during this party, meaning this was much smaller than the Zola's Lab 3 version. But hey, we wanted to do as much things different from that anyway, so I could understand why I decided to do that. And yes, there's proof of the Recycle Hunt to prove I wasn't actually kidding about that. Next up was the Celebration of Spring 2023. It started on April 27th and ended on May 11th. Now, this was another event for, ironically, the fifth time in a row to be across both labs. This would be the last one, though, thankfully. The Zola's Lab 2 version went for the exact length I just said. And the lab was decorated in a spring theme. It's actually kind of funny, because Lego's Island also had the celebration of spring around this time. So, there were, 3 different places celebrating spring at the same time, ironically. So that was pretty freaking cool. But yeah, mainly it was basically spring all over the lab. Like, basically everywhere. And there were so many items given out during this party. Like, a whole freaking ton, just like Lego's Island. And that was honestly so cool. And the roses from the Valentine's Day party made a return. And heck, in the second week of this party on May 4th, even more rooms were added that weren't there on week 1. Mainly because I didn't implement them at the time. But then I decided to on the second week because why not? And it ended up becoming one of the coolest things we did that year. At least in terms of that. So, with all that being said, let's see how the Souls F3 version of this party played out. Because like I said, it also played out across there as well. Now, this version of the event got slightly delayed by a few days. It was originally supposed to start on April 30th and end May 7th. However, it actually started on May 2nd and ended on May 9th. Because it took a few days to make the event. With all that being said, the Souls F3 version of this event was also very, very cool. Maybe not as cool as the Souls F2 version, but regardless, it was still really cool. Especially for it being delayed by 2 days. Yeah, I know, I'm surprised I was able to get it out as insane as I did. It pretty much played out exactly like Souls F2's version. Just, of course, with, of course, maybe a few different items. And outside of that, that's really it. Let's move on. Finally, for the first time this entire year, we finally had 2 different events across Souls Lab 2 and 3. Like, entirely. Well, mainly for just the month's events. Because Souls Lab 3 only got 2 events in January, while Souls Lab 2 got 3 events in January. So technically, this is technically the first month that we finally have 2 completely different events. This was actually a surprise party, which ended up being the Rainbow Party. It started on May 21st and came to an end on June 4th. In fact, I don't think it was actually supposed to go this long. I stand corrected. But yeah, this was all a surprise vote. And arguably also marked the return of the Rainbow Party after 2 years. But technically 3 years for Souls Lab 3. This was such a cool party. And it was all voted by you guys because this was a surprise vote. And it turned out amazing. The lab was decorated in a very colorful rainbow theme, which obviously made sense since that was what the event was. And arguably might have been one of the biggest rainbow parties in the entire lab's history since 2020. I don't think we'll ever beat that. I'm referring to the 2020 version of the party in Souls Lab 2. But this was so cool. And a lot of rainbow themed items were also given out as well. Overall, this was a really cool surprise party that we ended up having. Now, what was going on in Souls Lab 2 during this time? Well, when the celebration of spring ended on May 11th, an eclipse arrived at the lab, causing the lab to go into complete darkness. This would of course be for the next event, the Festival of Lights, but we'll get to that in a minute. Because of this ongoing eclipse, the entire lab, like I said, was in complete darkness, and 2 items were given out leading up to the event, which started on May 11th and technically ended on June 1st. Or more importantly, June 2nd. Regardless, this was in preparation for that upcoming event. Which, ironically, speaking of which, in the second week leading up to the party, the eclipse got slightly lighter, proving that the lights were coming. This was also when the construction of the party arrived. Now, it was finally time to see what the eclipse was for. The Festival of Lights 2023. It started on May 25th and was originally supposed to end on June 1st, but it ended on June 2nd instead, mainly because I forgot to take it down. But that actually was mainly because that was the same day that LEGO's Island Summer 2023 began. So that took up basically my entire focus of that day. So it was later taken down 1 day later on June 2nd. And we'll get to that mini event right after this. Rose Crystal also joined along in the tour of this party, as it was honestly very necessary. The lab was decorated in a very lit up theme, with so many lights surrounding the lab. And honestly, it was so cool. Basically, the entire world was decorated for this thing, or at least pretty much all of it. Like, that's seriously not a joke. Basically, the entirety of the world was decorated for this party. Yeah, even over here at the Starbucks area. Overall, this was so freaking cool. There were also tons of items given out here as well, much like the Rainbow Party. This right here, though, had to be one of my personal favorite lights. Overall, this party was honestly amazing, and who knows, maybe we might do it again one day. Until then, Let's move on. Like I said, we had a mini event that began immediately after this party concluded, being the Rainbow Cloud 5th anniversary. It was originally supposed to start on June 1st, but like I said, because LEGO's Island Summer 2023 took up basically the entirety of that day, I had to do it on June 2nd instead. But it thankfully ended the day it was supposed to, being June 8th. This was a very small mini event. Like a really small mini event. Mainly only consisting of the front of the lab, and of course the Rainbow Cloud to be updated. And there were a few items given out in this party, even if it was quite small. There's not much to say about this, so let's move on. The next event to occur in Zola's Lab 3, to be specific, was the Summer Party of 2023. It started on June 18th and originally was supposed to end on June 25th with another event coinciding alongside it, but instead, like I just said, it coincided with another event, which we'll actually talk about when we talk about Zola's Lab 2, because they may or may not be related. For the summer party portion, the entire lab was decorated in a summer theme, and this was also arguably the first summer party to be held in Zola's Lab 3 since 2020. The entire lab was decorated in a summer theme, with some slight 1.20 elements being implemented in as well. But it wouldn't be till like a week later until that happened, which can mainly explain why the event didn't end on the day it was supposed to. But we'll talk about that very soon. Like, basically the entire lab was decorated for this entire thing, with a few pools around here, like some beaches as well. Like we had a few beach areas around here as well. And it was actually really cool. Honestly, this had to be one of the coolest summer parties I ever did in the entire lab's history. And it only got better from here. Because the day the event was originally supposed to conclude, a ton of legitimate 1.20 elements were actually implemented, extending the event by 1 week, ending on July 2nd. Now I can say the length. This made the party honestly a whole lot cooler than the first week, as it truly looked even more summer themed than ever before. And this book right here proved exactly that. Speaking of 1.20, that's exactly what the June event of Zola's Lab 2 was, starting on June 22nd and ending on July 6th. As you would expect, the lab was decorated in a obvious theme for 1.20, with one area being dedicated to a certain part of the update, much like how the 1.19 party played out in Zola's Lab 3 a year prior. And when this party began, there were certain rooms that were renovated to fit the theme a lot better, such as some certain fences being changed to pink, which would be like that permanently as well. This honestly had to be my personal favorite room right here. I'm not kidding. And so was Rose Crystals. Each room of the party would also feature all of their respective items dedicated to that certain feature. For example, the backyard would feature the Cherry Grove portion of the update, with all the items related to it being featured there. And there was new items every single day. Like literally for all 14 days of this party, no day was skipped. The library also got renovated to see the chiseled bookshelves, which are here permanently. That also went for the clothes shop. This party featured so many cool renovations that truly did improve Zola's Lab 2, and even Zola's Lab 3 as well. Even the Potion Lab got updated, which was awesome, featuring that very specific calibrated sensor item, which is actually still in there to this very day. Because of how freaking awesome it was, we decided to add this to Zola's Lab 3 as well on June 25th, making the event extended by 1 week. Now things are finally coming together. With all that said, that wraps all of this up. Next up is an event that was supposed to occur across both labs, but didn't. This being the 4th of July Party 2023. It started on July 2nd and came to an end on July 10th. It was originally supposed to be July 9th, but I forgot to showcase the rest of the items on that day, so I had to do it the day after. Some elements from the Summer Party / 1.20 Party also were still around during this party. And that was pretty cool. This party mainly took place at night, much like the 2019 one did, and a lot of cool items were still given out during this party. Overall, a good majority of the lab was actually decorated, if not almost all of it actually. So that was pretty cool. There's not too much to say about this party, so let's move on. The next event to occur took place in Zola's Lab 2, being the Water Party of 2023. It started on July 20th and ended on August 3rd. This was the first standalone water party in Zola's Lab 2 in 5 years at the time. This was mainly to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of the original water party in 2018, even though it was actually held past the anniversary instead. More importantly, 15 days after the anniversary occurred. But regardless, we still did something anyway. As you would expect, the lab was decorated in a water theme. That was obvious. And pretty much everywhere was updated, actually. Like, pretty much everywhere was updated. Unlike last time, though, not the entire lab was, like, flooded on the floor. Like, the floor was not, like, all changed into water. Only certain rooms. Yeah, literally only certain rooms had water on the floor. It's not like the whole entire event like 2018 where that was. But it was still really fun regardless. And a lot of items were given out. Like one, I think, every single day, just like the 1.20 party. But overall, this was such a fun party. And it was so cool finally having a standalone water party again here in Zola's Lab 2 after 5 years, as the last few were held in Zola's Lab 3 over the last few years. So this was so cool to see again in Zola's Lab 2. And I don't know when we're going to be seeing it here again. Who knows? Oh yeah, and some rooms I think were flooded, like I think the ore room and giant window room, but that was just a few. Actually, it's ironic that I say that something was flooded, because that was exactly what Zola's Lab 3 was at the time. Literally underwater. It started on July 23rd and ended on August 3rd, originally meaning to end on August 6th, but I'll explain why that's the case later. As you would expect, the lab was decorated in an underwater theme, and there were so many items in this party. Fun fact, this was actually a part of the original surprise vote in May, but I think I later removed it because I wanted to do it in a different month. So that's actually a fun fact. Regardless, this was such a cool party, but it only got cooler than that. Because on the second week of the party, something huge was implemented that was originally not supposed to stay permanent, but ended up actually becoming permanent because of how huge it was. This would be the underwater maze, and during this party, we finally got to see the inside of the balcony via this underwater maze. That's right! We finally got to see what was inside the balcony this whole time. After what we saw in Zola's Lab 2, because we already got to see what was inside that via the fall maze in 2022. Now we got to see what was inside the Zola's Lab 3 one this whole time. And this wouldn't be the only time. This was such a cool feature. And there's a reason why it stayed permanently after. This thing was massive. Like, this entire underwater maze was freaking massive to the point where I just straight up did not want to get rid of it. It was that huge and would take forever to clean up. And then I realized, you know what? We didn't really have anything in the water in Zola's Lab 3 prior to this. I mean, for Zola's Lab 2, we had the cruise ship. Why not do something for Zola's Lab 3? Even though it was only supposed to be for just this party. But hey, I left it permanently because it felt way too cool not to remove it. And I mean, we get to go inside the balcony because of it, so that was pretty freaking cool. And that literally wraps up this whole party. Let's move on to the next one. Unfortunately, after both the underwater party and water party for both Zola's Lab 2 and 3 concluded, we unfortunately lost access to Zola's Lab 2 and 3 temporarily starting August 3rd, 2023. Which was kind of ironic because that was just a few days shy of the 5-year anniversary of Zola's Lab 2's original shutdown. Thankfully, this was later resolved not long after that on August 14th, 2023. That can explain why the underwater party ended 3 days early. This was mainly because Rose Crystal just straight up could not access Minecraft at the time, meaning we had no way of getting into Zola's Lab 2 and 3 to clean up those two parties respectively. They still technically ended that day, mainly because we weren't able to access them, which caused their shutdown for only 11 days. It even got to a point where even the Creations World had a mini-event to commemorate this occasion and the 5-year anniversary of Zola's Lab 2's shutdown. Thankfully, on August 14th, 2023, this again would be later resolved, as apparently it was just a glitch with the launcher and it just needed to update for her at the time. So thankfully by then we were able to actually get back in and continue things as normal. However, we were not expecting to get it back that quickly, hence why I held the welcome back party. I was going to do it regardless, but I just didn't think it was going to be that quickly. I didn't think we were probably going to get it back for like a month or something. But no, a welcome back party was held in Zolas Lab 2, starting on August 14th and ending on August 17th. There was originally supposed to be one for Zolas Lab 3, but unfortunately I just could not get around to doing it at the time. So instead, only Zolas Lab 2 held this party. Because of it being an event we never were expecting to make, this was rather small. It mainly celebrated the return of these two labs after just only a week and a half, even though Zolas Lab 2 was the only one to get this event. And there were a few items given out throughout the event. 3 items total to be specific, since this was a very short party. And to prove that it was that small, literally none of the inside of the lab, outside of course the lab office and flower shop, weren't even decorated, proving that this was such a small party, as this was never planned, because we never knew that this was ever going to happen. There's not much else to say about this party. Just a few items were given out, and it was great to finally get the 2 labs back after a bit. Now, let's get on to the actual events of August. With both labs back, Zolas Lab 3 celebrated an introduction of the dojos with the Elemental Party 2023. It started on August 27th and was originally supposed to end on September 3rd, but I delayed it and extended it because not all the dojos were done in time. It instead ended on September 10th. Like I said, this party celebrated the opening of all 4 Elemental dojos in Zolas Lab 3. And just the introduction of the dojo again overall for the first time since the original Zolas Lab 3 in 2017. The only difference is that the Elemental dojos were here this time around, with basically all the lab being decorated in the 4 elements: fire, water, snow, and sky. Like I said, this party marked the introduction of the Elemental dojos in Zolas Lab 3 and played out very differently compared to the Zolas Lab 2 counterparts, with all the challenges being completely different. And it played out like this for all the other dojos as well. While all dojos except for the first one were delayed by a few days, they all came out amazing. For example, the Water Dojo was supposed to originally come out on August 29th, but instead came out on the 30th. The Snow Dojo was supposed to come out on August 31st, but came out on September 8th instead. And lastly, the Sky Dojo was supposed to come out on September 2nd, but came out on September 10th instead, the day the event actually ended. Now, while all of this was going on in Zolas Lab 3, it was all about saving the Zolas Lab 2 portion of the Zolas Lab 2 timeline in Zolas Lab 2. With Operation Zolas Lab 2023 Part 2, which was, of course, saving the timeline seized from existence. This was originally supposed to be from August 5th through the 10th of 2023. However, because of the temporary shutdown of Zolas Lab 2 and 3 on August 3rd of the same month, it was delayed to August 31st, because we obviously had to get the labs back in order to do that. The point behind this was completely different compared to the first part. Evil Cluck and Master Evil Oinkers would seek revenge on me by trying to, of course, erase everything from the timeline, seizing certain parts of certain time periods from existence, making them transparent, as they were trying to be faded away from the timeline. And our job was to obviously fix them before they legitimately ceased from existence. It would not exist anymore in the timeline. It started on August 31st and ended on September 5th, which was basically the entirety of Labor Day weekend, except for August 31st, because I still had school that day. Oh yeah, this was around the time that I started school at USF at the time. Around this time, actually. Actually, it was a few days after the Welcome Back party, actually. Like a week after that, actually. So by the time the Elemental party was going on, I was already doing that. On the first day, August 31st, 2023, we went to February 18th, 2016, which was the first ever Zolas Lab War. The goal was to obviously fix the lab office before it ceased from existence, and we did exactly that. On day 2, Friday, September 1st, 2023, we went to January 13th, 2016, which arguably, as of recording this video, is exactly 8 years ago today. Hooray! No, literally, This was exactly 8 years ago, the day I am actually recording this video. Because, fun fact for all of you, by the way, it is January 13th, 2024, which means it is exactly 8 years after this time period. So it's funny that I'm mentioning it here. The point behind this one was that the first anniversary party of Zola's Lab was ceasing from existence, and we needed to fix all of it before it would be gone forever. On day 3, Saturday, September 2nd, 2023, we went to August 9th, 2020, which was the day of the second anniversary of Zola's Lab 2's original 2018 shutdown. This, we had to fix the garage from ceasing from existence. We also had to destroy certain, warning signs as well. So that was crazy. On day 4, Sunday, September 3rd, 2023, we went to February 17th, 2022, when the lab was now starting to get taken over by, of course, the 3 villains that would eventually do it later on: Evil Sheet Leader, Evil Cluck, and Master Evil Oinkers. The point is, this was very interesting, as certain parts of the lab were now starting to legitimately cease from existence. And heck, even I was starting to cease from existence too during this time. They were not only getting rid of just the lab anymore, but me and Rose Crystal as well, which was very scary. Finally, but not least, on day 5, Monday, September 4th, 2023, which was also arguably Labor Day at the time, we went around technically 10 months into the future to July 25th, 2024. And the future time period was basically a Christmas in July themed event, which arguably actually is going to be happening in July for Zola's Lab 2 on July 25th itself. Oh man, thank you past future self for that, because they gave me the inspiration for that apparently. So that's how that became a thing. Anyway, the main goal. That, of course, was to obviously defeat Evil Cluck and Master Evil Oinkers. We were also able to get myself turned back to normal temporarily during the battle. The battle ended up taking on top of the police station / prison, as you could clearly see here. And even after we defeated them, there were still a ton of mobs coming after me. We did end up defeating them though, and the future time period looked really cool as well. I won't be surprised if this ends up actually being what it does end up looking like in the actual party later this year. I really wouldn't be surprised. With all that said and done, we can move on. But we weren't done with mission-based events just yet. Nope. We only had one more to deal with, and then we were free after this for the rest of the year. This being Operation Clones in Zola's Lab 2. And only in Zola's Lab 2. It started on September 21st and ended on October 5th. Master Evil Oinkers made clones of basically every single sheep across the entire lab, and their goal was to decolor the entire lab. We had to stop the clones and find the real version of the said sheep, put them in the sheep dispenser, which we thought we would never use again, to get them back in. We had to kill one of the clones to get their color, to be able to put in the sheep generator to get the real one back. But we had to find the named version of the said sheep as well. By doing so, the color of the respective room that the clones decolored would return to normal. And this would be the case for around 5 missions straight, with multiple sheep being saved each mission. Scratch that. There were 6 missions. Sorry, I read that wrong. Was off by 1 number. Now, some missions were actually delayed a bit. For example, to purposely clarify, this was September 21st, September 27th, which was supposed to be September 23rd. This would have been September 26th, but it ended up being September 28th instead. This would have been September 28th, but been on the 29th instead. This would have been September 29th, but ended up being October 2nd instead. And lastly, this would have been on October 2nd, but was on October 4th instead. So every single mission except for the first one came out late, either being a few days late or 1 day late. Regardless, all of them but the first one were delayed, and that was indefinitely my fault. This was crazy, man. We did end up defeating all the clones of Master Evil Oinkers at the end inside of his base, and all was saved, and would be the last mission-based event for the entirety of 2023. Now, while we were dealing with all those clones, Zola's Lab 3 had a celebration of fall, which started on September 24th and came to an end on October 1st. This event mainly took place in the evening, and the entire lab was all decorated in fall decoration, which was very cool at the time. A lot of items were also given out as well, so that was pretty cool. In fact, some of the layout here actually stayed for a few months, such as, of course, the ground right here. That actually stayed for, all the way until, December. This was honestly a very pretty event, and especially it taking place at evening also really helped that. Like I said, a lot of items were given out, and overall, it was a great event. Let's move on. Now, in the middle of Operation Clones, we did end up having an anniversary party to celebrate the 8-year anniversary of Zola's Lab 2. It started on September 29th and came to an end on October 2nd. Actually, I think October 1st. Regardless, the only rooms that were decorated were mainly the rooms that were already saved from the clone, and certain rooms that weren't were obviously not decorated. But a good majority of the lab was decorated to celebrate this very awesome weekend-long anniversary party. It would be the 2nd year in a row that we did something to celebrate the anniversary of Zola's Lab 2. So if we can keep that streak going this year in 2024, that would be freaking nice, especially since it lands on a Sunday. God dang it. I say that because that's normally the day we update ZL3. Oh well. Regardless, this was a very cool party, even if it was only a few days long. Okay, so it did end October 1st. Okay, just making sure. Actually, a good majority of the world was actually decorated for this party, so never mind. Or it mainly could have just been the lab itself. Regardless, there's not too much to say about this, so let's move on. Actually, this next one is also a mini event, but takes place in Zola's Lab 3. After the events of the Celebration of Fall came the Fiesta 2023. It is also arguably the first ever Celebration of Fall, the Fiesta, to actually take place in Zola's Lab 3. And actually, scratch that. The same thing also goes for the Celebration of Fall. Those two events had never occurred in Zola's Lab 3 before. Actually, the last 3 events we talked about for Zola's Lab 3 all never occurred in Zola's Lab 3 before alongside the Underwater Party. The lab was decorated in a Fiesta theme, and it was very nice to finally have this outside of Zola's Lab 2 for once. The lab was still centered at evening, because honestly, during the Celebration of Fall, it still looked really cool. This only lasted for a week, much like the Celebration of Fall did, starting on October 1st and ending on October 8th. And yes, Fiesta Sheep was around. And yes, there's your legitimate proof, right down there that, yeah, he was here. So, that was pretty cool. A few items were given out during this party, and almost the entire lab was decorated. So, with that said, let's move on. Next up is, of course, Halloween. The Halloween party of 2023. It started on October 19th and ended on November 2nd. This is at least the Zola's Lab 2 version, which were very different, much like 2022. But the good news is, they weren't mission-based. Speaking of which, as I just addressed earlier, there are no more mission-based events, so we're going to get through this rather quickly. It was back to a more traditional Halloween party from 2015 to 2017, as that was my idea behind this. There was no specific theme for this party. It was just a ton of random things all in one, just like the first few Halloween parties, which was awesome. Of course, there were still a few new things that were obviously implemented. One of the new major elements was the fact that we could actually transform into something, aka a ghost. We had never been able to do anything like this before, so that was the technically only new element in this party. The skyscraper returned like normal, and actually, one of the skyscraper rooms, ironically the first one, required us to actually transform into a ghost. This was also the first skyscraper year since arguably 2015 and 2018 respectively, to not require us to do anything in the basement. So technically, it would be the first time in technically 5 years that would be the case. Insane. But yeah, the first room we had to go through walls as a ghost, hence why it was implemented in the first place, but also to give the event something new. And much like 2022, all the challenges were entirely new, and all the rooms were completely transformed. Of course, the entire lab was obviously decorated for this party, and for the first time in probably 5 or 6 years, Costume Sheep finally made her appearance back again in Zola's Lab 2. For the first time since the Halloween party of 2017. The difference is that it would be located in the clothes shop, and new costumes would be featured every single day, up until the event's conclusion. Well, except for November 1st, because that would be, of course, after Halloween, but technically, all but one day featured something from this very shop. It was so cool to see Costume Sheep again, for the first time in 6 years, proving that we truly did do something special here. And that it wasn't related to a certain theme anymore. No, we just did whatever we wanted. And honestly, that just made it a whole lot more fun on our part. On my part specifically. This party was a blast to work on. And heck, on the second week of the party, or actually, arguably, the 22nd of October specifically, more rooms were implemented, and then even more were added on the second week on the 26th. It was so much fun to not rely on a certain theme for these parties anymore, and I'm gonna be honest, maybe we should do that again this year. That was actually really fun, because it finally just showed that I had a lot more creativity when I have no theme that I feel like doing. But that didn't say the same thing, though, for Zolzav 3, on the other hand. Yeah, Zolzav 3 actually did have a theme. But this was actually very fun. It was the Halloween Fair 2023. Basically, a recreation of the original that took place in Zolzav 3 5 years prior. It started on October 22nd and ended on November 5th. This obviously was very different from the first one, as obviously first off it was in a completely different world, and a lot of the games acted completely different, and there were obviously ones that weren't there in the first one. Of course, the lab was decorated still in a Halloween theme, with a ton of fair games all over the place, but more Halloween themed, obviously. So that was very, very cool. We even dug for certain items, which was pretty cool. And this game in particular, though, right here, the target game, was also pretty intense as well. And remember how I said this wouldn't be the only time we would see the balcony, the inside of it, because during the Halloween party, a fair game was actually held inside the balcony, making its second appearance. We haven't done anything with this ever since. And there was a secondary prize move in there for the fair for the second week of the event. Speaking of the second week, a roller coaster was later implemented on that day, October 29th, respectively, alongside beginning the second prize booth. Of course, the highlight of the second week was, of course, the Halloween roller coaster, which was very cool. This was such a fun ride, and it did take a while to make and also clean up at the same time, but this was so freaking cool, man. Like, we did a lot of things. Oh yeah, there was also a Halloween-themed circus tent as well, as you can see right there, by the way. There we go, now I mentioned it. But overall, this was a very fun party, and unlike the original Halloween Fair in 2018, this actually went past Halloween and ended on the day it was supposed to, with no unexpected occurrences happening, unlike that party. I mainly brought back the Halloween Fair, mainly to celebrate its 5-year anniversary, but also mainly to commemorate the fact that it didn't go past Halloween originally in 2018. Where it ended on October 29th, which was also ironically the day this video was ironically filmed right here. That's another reason. But also, mainly because it was the event that transitioned us into this version of Zolzav 3 back in the day. Which can explain why the next event would celebrate the 5-year anniversary of the universe-themed Zolzav 3, which is the present-day version of Zolzav 3. It started on November 9th and ended on the 12th, so literally just a few days after the Halloween party came to a close. This was also, ironically fun fact, the same day I hit 900 subscribers on this channel, which, as of recording this video, we have 979. But let's get back to the point. Actually, there was a Zolzav 2 version of this party as well. Let's talk about that one first, since it's the smaller one of the two. It started on November 9th and only lasted the one day. With it being the smaller one of the two, only the roof and the UFO were decorated for this party, with only a anniversary hat and banner featured as well. This was honestly really cool. I mainly held this in Zolzav 2 as well, mainly because I had no idea what I wanted to do for updates that day. Like, that was like one of the only days that I never had an update planned for it. So I thought, let's just do something for it. Of course, the Zolzav 3 version, the main reason behind this, was obviously way bigger. We'll get to that in a sec. Never mind, the underground party room was also updated. And of course the UFO as well, which was all very cool. And of course it took place at night to reference the space theme. Now we're back at the Zolzav 3 version, which obviously was the main part of this event. Since obviously this was what it was actually about. Basically, the entire lab was obviously decorated for this party to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of this specific version of Zolzav 3, which was honestly super freaking cool. And yes, even the UFO was decorated here as well. The party mainly consisted of all of the original Zolazab 3 colors in the universe theme, being purple and blue respectively, with still having some slight space elements as well, mainly on the floor. And like I said, this was the same day that I hit 900 subscribers, so that was still pretty cool. And yes, basically all of the planets were updated as well. This obviously made the most sense. Obviously, you know, considering this was all about Zolazab 3 and its universe theme. So of course, the entirety of space was decorated for this thing. And that's about it. Overall, this was a very fun party, and let's move on. On November 23rd, 2023, we hit the 300th Zolazab 2 episode. But it was also, ironically, Thanksgiving as well, on the same day as the 6-year anniversary of the Zolazab 2 2017 corruption. This event was a trio event, combining all 3 of them together. It started on November 23rd and ended on the 30th. Because it was a combination of all 3, we did something to celebrate each. For example, for the 6-year anniversary of the 2017 corruption, there was a few mini decorations right next to the gravestone. Mainly a hat and banner respectively, as we could see right here as well. This was very, very cool. Most of the lab, though, was mainly decorative for episode 300, but there were actually some rooms that actually ended up being decorative for just Thanksgiving alone. Again, mainly because this was literally on the same day as that. Because of this, certain rooms were decorated for Thanksgiving alone, and basically every single sheep in basically the entire lab's history basically was here for this party, and it was so freaking cool. Mainly for the Thanksgiving portion, to be specific. But overall, this party was amazing, and Rose Crystal loved it as well. Was beyond proud of this party. This was probably one of my finest works yet, especially for a milestone. And especially since there were 2 other things on it on the exact same day, it made it so much cooler. The main colors of the party mainly consisted of pink, brown, and yellow, mainly again to represent 300 episodes and Thanksgiving itself. For example, my house was all decorated for Thanksgiving. The same also could be said for Empro's house, including the lab hallway, as that's where everybody was. And the backyard looks so cool as well, with a huge pool and water slide. Even the UFO looked amazing. And the roof. God, that looked beautiful. I did not need to go this insane, but I did anyway because I'm just that good. There were so many items available in this party, mainly because it's a combination of 3. And seriously, I was just beyond proud of this party. It was just something I'm just very proud of. And, yeah. Well, that was only for Zolazab 2. What was in Zolazab 3 during this time? That would be the Festival of Lights 2023. After originally doing it in Zolazab 2, it gave me the idea to also do it in Zolazab 3. Because why the frick not? If it was already that cool in Zolazab 2, why not do it here as well? It started on November 26th and ended on December 3rd. So this is what was going on while we were celebrating 300 episodes of Zolazab 2. And it had a very lit up fall theme to it. As you could tell, there were lit up pumpkins everywhere in this party. And genuinely, it looked amazing. It continued the little space theme that we had at the beginning of the month with the anniversary of Zolazab 3. Fun fact, there was an eclipse that did start taking place prior to this party, starting November 12th, and continuing on until the 19th, with it all beginning on the 26th. Very similarly to Zolazab 2, just, 6 months later. And fun fact, there were actually some rooms from Operation Zolazab 2022 that actually did appear in this party, with just some minor differences being some banners. I did this because, well, why not have these rooms featured in an actual event? Because that was mainly an attack back then. And I think that was also, the 4th mission of that event. Do correct me if I'm wrong again, but this was actually really freaking cool. Actually, that's actually what a good majority of these actually were, some of these rooms. Mainly the inside one. The outside was all new, as we could clearly see here. So there's your proof I wasn't lying. I also wasn't expecting to do this right here, but I did anyway. And see, I told you the underwater maze stayed after this. This was honestly so freaking cool. And arguably, a lot of items were also given out during this party, much like the Zolazab 2 version 6 months prior. And we were actually supposed to come here on November 29th to celebrate 5 years of this Zolazab Freeze corruption, but we never did because I completely forgot, and that was my fault. So, yeah. Remember what I did mention earlier on day 5 of part 1 of Operation Zolazab that we were supposed to do that? Yeah, it never ended up happening. So, yeah. Anyway, that wraps up this event. It was mainly like the Zolazab 2 version, with a more fall theme to it. And with all that said, let's move on. Well guys, here we are, the final event of the year. The Christmas Party 2023. At least for Zolazab 3, because the Zolazab 2 one didn't start till a few days later. It started on December 17th, 2023, and was originally supposed to end on December 31st, but it instead ended on January 7th, 2024 by complete accident because I forgot to take it down. That is my fault intended, and we ended up not getting a New Year's party here because of that. That's actually not a joke. Thankfully, the snow actually was here this year, unlike the previous year where it all turned into ice, where only the roof had snow and nowhere else. This party was all about lit up trees with garland on them to be specific. That can explain why all the snow was still here. And even the beacons matched that as well, which made it even cooler. Now, rooms that didn't have the lit up trees, because they were mainly an outside thing, just had traditional Christmas decorations, like the roof here for example. And that also mainly went for the inside rooms as well. Of course, the donation thing returned like normal, and we did end up reaching the goal, despite the event ending a week late. Regardless, unlike the last Christmas party, there was no missions. We finally could do whatever we wanted. This was the only Christmas party out of the 2 to not have a mission. So that was pretty cool. And no, the ice castle from the year prior did not make a return. Actually, if you look at it, a majority of the inside rooms in this party actually had a candy cane theme to it, while the outside had mainly all lit up trees, which was very, very cool at the time. Unfortunately, though, this would be the first Zolazab free Christmas party ever in its entire existence to not feature the Railroad donation games, which was quite odd considering this was the year of its 5-year anniversary. I guess we just forgot to implement them. But, oh well, there's always this year in 2024 to do that. Plus also, the lab landscape has actually changed a lot since the last party, so that probably could also explain. Plus also, with a lot of these things covering the ground, it's becoming a lot harder to implement it now, if I'm being honest, and I'm not making that up. That's actually serious. So that's probably a reason why it wasn't featured. So, actually, now that I think about it, the lab landscape didn't really change that much, actually. It's just it's getting harder to implement. And that's actually, again, being 100% serious, actually. Which is why I didn't include it. Hopefully this year, though, if I can get a way to work around it. Regardless, this was a very fun Christmas party. Now, what was going on at Zolazab 2 for this party? Well, actually, I shouldn't have gone to Zolazab 3 for that, because apparently there was actually one more event before Christmas. Out of absolutely nowhere. On November 30th, 2023, alongside the snow update, aka the winter update, came a surprise fair that came out of nowhere, which was arguably a last-minute decision. Zolazab 2 actually had a fair, which was crazy. It started on November 30th and ended on December 7th. This was a last-minute event, as I realized Zolazab 2 went the whole year without a fair. Now I know we could have done that again, because we had the Zolazab 3 one, but I didn't want to keep this world left out. So I decided to implement one last minute, right after hitting episode 300 a week beforehand. Many games were spread across the lab, and it was in a more winter theme if it wasn't already freaking obvious. Actually, it is true, because that's exactly what it was. A majority of the colors of this party were actually the Festival of Snow colors. Even the forts were designed in a winter theme, except for that yellow and magenta one. Heck, the Lazy River room actually was actually implemented in this party with a more ice theme, which was so freaking cool. And actually, I think it's still like this to this very day. We might keep it around until the winter's over. So that's pretty cool. I think I actually stated that we would do that after this party ended, which was pretty cool. This would, though, be the first fair ever to not feature a single ride since 2018's Halloween fair in Zoa's Lab 3. So that was one of the major disappointments in this party. Because it was so last minute, I did not have time to implement a single ride, which is unfortunate. We will make that up for this year's fair in September. Regardless, a very fun fair, and now, for real this time, let's move on to the Zoa's Lab 2 version of the Christmas party. I apologize for going out of order. I literally just realized that right after we did that. Okay, for real this time, the Zoa's Lab 2 version of the Christmas party 2023. It started on December 21st, 2023, and ended on January 4th, 2024. This party was a lot smaller than the Zoa's Lab 2 version of it in 2022. Yeah, this was a lot smaller than the 2022 event, because unlike 2021 and 2022, not the entire world was decorated. But if I'm being completely honest, I wasn't planning to do that again anyway, because of how hard it was these last 2 years. But I wanted to see how insane I could go those last 2 years, so I took the risk. This time, I just did not feel like doing it. And honestly, it worked so much better in my favor, as it was much easier to clean up. Well, I said this was that free one. That wasn't that hard, actually. This party actually featured a mission. Only one, though. Oh yeah, and the advent calendar returned across both Zoa's Lab 2 and 3 again. So, that was pretty cool, alongside donations as well. Anyway, the main objective behind this party. After the events of the missing gifts the year prior, we decided we didn't want that to happen again. So, our primary goal was to deliver presents to a village. And Santa Sheep was obviously here to help. This was honestly so freaking cool. A train station was implemented just for this quest, which took place on December 24th, 2023 respectively. And to clarify, this was the train station right here. Of course, as in tradition, the Christmas workshop would obviously return, but there was one minor difference, including the fact that we were finally able to go behind here where the conveyor belt was, hence why Mr. Sheep was back there at the time. And the train station looked like this, just to clarify. We delivered all of these presents to the village, and it was honestly such a cool quest. And it was to obviously make up for what happened the year prior, where all the gifts were stolen and we had to go find them alongside the sleigh crash that we also had to deal with the year prior. All of that was completely gone this time, as it was back to a more positive, light-hearted theme, with again a majority of the lab being decorated as well. But this was such a fun quest. And for doing all of this, we were finally able to figure out what was in those presents this entire time that we were delivering to all of these houses in the village just a few days beforehand. Hence the present update, which also occurred in Zoa's Lab 3 as well. Overall, this party featured all new rooms just like the last few Christmas parties. Some actually done weeks ahead of time, actually, of the actual event, starting all the way back on December 7th, the day of the fair end. We may or may not have a slight peppermint theme in here somewhere, just like Lego's Island, but that was only in certain rooms. But yeah, basically the entire lab was decorated for this party. Not the entirety of the Zoa's Lab 2 world, but basically the entirety of the lab, except for the classic version. For some reason. I guess I just never did that. But I'll try and hopefully make up for that this year. This was such a fun party. Probably not as cool as 2022. I don't think we're ever going to beat that. But this is probably a close second, if I had to be honest. With all that being said, though, thank you all so much. After an hour of this insanity, we're finally done. And finally, it is 1.5 hours shorter than the previous year. Hooray! Finally! We finally accomplished it 2 weeks in a row. Actually, 3 weeks in a row, because the backyard ones for 2022 were also an hour long, which that ended up getting shortened to 53 minutes. So there we go, guys. That is it for all events in 2023. I'm sorry if I did go out of order for the last two, but that was because I kind of forgot up until I realized. Regardless, though, this year, as you could tell, was a much more lighthearted year. And 2024 might also be like that too, because we're not doing that many mission-based events. So this should also be a slightly shorter year as well. And with all that being said, that wraps up all of this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one on Saturday, January 20th, for where we take a look at all of the LEGO Master 627's Creations events in 2023. Even though I'm still going to do one for 2022. I'll do that probably right before that. But with all that said, I will see you all next time. Goodbye, everybody. And what was your favorite event of 2023? I don't know. I can't decide myself. They were all amazing. And, well, here's to an incredible 2024 for both Souls Out 2 and 3. It's going to be one heck of a year again, and it's going to be awesome.